What if everything you believe about God is a memory, but not yours? What if the sky beings of ancient texts weren't gods, but colonizers? You weren't meant to ask these questions. They were buried under centuries of translation, of doctrine, of fear. You were told these stories are sacred, and they are, but not in the way you've been taught. For 30 years, he preached the book of Genesis. He knew it by heart. He taught pastors how to read it, how to find God's voice in the ancient words, until the words began to speak for themselves and said something else. In Hebrew, the word used isn't God. It's Elohim, plural noun, the powerful ones. And suddenly, phrases like, "Let us make man in our image," no longer sound metaphorical. They sound like a conversation among beings. Who are the us? The question led beyond the Bible, beyond Jerusalem, beyond even Egypt. It led to the dust of Mesopotamia, to clay tablets older than Moses. There, the names change, but the stories remain. Adam and Eve, the flood, the tower. You find them in Sumerian cuneiform, almost word for word. But in those older tellings, there's no mention of God. There are only the Anunnaki, those who came from the heavens to the earth. And they didn't come to bless us. They came to build, to mine, to rule, to engineer. According to these texts, the Anunnaki found Earth rich not with spirit but with resources, gold, power, life forms that could be modified. They took a local primate, manipulated its DNA with theirs, and called it human. You and I, not the children of angels but the offspring of colonizers. This is not a metaphor. And this story, this terrifying possibility, didn't originate in some fringe conspiracy. It began in academic silence in the career of Nathaniel Schmidt, a scholar of Semitic languages, dismissed from Colgate University in 1896 not for incompetence, but for reading. He had read too much. He compared Genesis with the Sumerian tablets and found more than similarities. He found origins. The stories in the Bible, he realized, are echoes, retellings of a much older human memory. A memory where God is not the beginning, but the cover. He was fired. He was also right. And now the question is no longer, did it happen? But why did they not want us to know? It wasn't just the stories that aligned. It was the tone, the architecture of control. The Sumerian king's list, a dry record etched into clay, begins with a shock. It lists dynasties that ruled for 24,510 years. Not mythically, precisely. 3 months and 3.5 days. A reign split between only 23 kings. That's over 1,000 years per ruler. And before the Great Flood, 8 kings ruled for a combined 241,000 years. These were not human kings, and the tablets never claimed they were. They ruled before flesh took the throne, before mortality was installed into the human code. The king's list tells us something the Bible only whispers. We were not the first civilization, and we were not born free. We were designed, engineered to serve. According to the older narrative, humanity was created not by divine command, but by technological intent. To build, to harvest, to obey. It was the Anunnaki, sky beings with a hunger for Earth's minerals, who shaped Homo sapiens as a labor force, a genetic hybrid of the celestial and the terrestrial. Some deny the translation. Some say Anunnaki simply means nobility or rulers. But when you break the word apart, Anu, heaven, Ki, earth, the meaning glows clear. Those who came from heaven to earth, their glyph, the sky, and suddenly the Bible's Elohim, the powerful ones, fit, the plural. The verbs in first-person plural. Let us descend. Let us make man. They saw the daughters of men were beautiful and took them. These are not divine metaphors. They are colonizer grammar. Genesis, then, is not a holy beginning. It is a redacted history, a sanitized echo of a colonization event. And like all empires, the rulers did not remain visible forever. At first, they came with ships from the sky. With power, with tools, with knowledge. They taught early humans mathematics, agriculture, accounting, metallurgy. They built the first cities. They created kingship. And then they left, or appeared to. They handed rule over to human proxies, created institutions to preserve their systems, and vanished behind the curtain of mythology. But the systems remained: currency, contracts, measurements of time, labor, taxation. All of it. The divine right of kings was not divine. It was inherited from above. Not all sky beings agreed on what humanity should become. The Sumerian tablets tell of a split. Two brothers. Two agendas. Enlil, the supreme commander, and Enki, the chief scientist, the architect of Earth's project. One ruled with severity, the other with subtlety. Enlil saw humans as tools, disposable, dangerous when left unsupervised. It was Enlil who shortened the human lifespan, who ordered the flood to wipe us out when we multiplied too quickly. It was Enlil who tampered with our language, fractured our collective mind, and cursed us with the tower's collapse. But it was Enki who disobeyed. Enki who whispered to Atrahasis, the Noah figure, and taught him to build an ark. Who altered our neural code, secretly elevating our consciousness. Who planted within us the seeds of curiosity, of rebellion, of memory. The Bible calls it the fall, the eating of the forbidden fruit. But in the older story it was an upgrade and a betrayal. Humans became too aware, too close to becoming like one of us. As the Elohim said, that was the real danger. Not sin, but awakening. The fear of a species no longer under control. This ancient drama of suppression and subversion lives in every myth. Prometheus stealing fire, Lucifer bringing light, serpents whispering truth. Behind each story, the same structure. Someone from above gave us something we weren't meant to have, and someone else tried to take it back. This is the origin of the war for humanity's consciousness. It didn't start with nations or religions. It began with DNA, with the silent question encoded in every cell. Do you remember who made you? And deeper still, what if they didn't agree? The tablets paint a picture of a family divided, of a ruling class not unified in cruelty, but split in motive. Some wanted workers, others wanted students. Some wanted loyalty, others wanted evolution. And we, the humans, were born in that tension. If this were merely myth, it would not need suppression. But history, when it hides truth, always leaves fingerprints. In 2003, during the earliest days of the Iraq invasion, a team entered a zone near Uruk, protected by American troops. What were they looking for? According to whispers, and later confirmed by scattered reports, they found the tomb of Gilgamesh. Not a legend, a body, sealed in a sarcophagus beneath the sands. Gilgamesh, the hybrid, 2/3 Anunnaki, 1/3 man. And when the location was verified, the excavation was paused, officially silenced. What they found they would not share. It was not the first time. In 1927, Sir Leonard Woolley uncovered the tomb of Queen Puabi, a high-ranking Sumerian woman buried with unimaginable wealth and an intact skeleton. She was not average, not in structure, not in cranial form, and certainly not in genetics. Modern DNA testing could tell us whether she was fully human. But the tests were never published. Quietly, the trail went cold. Why? Why, when we have the tools to answer humanity's greatest question, what are we? Do we look away? The answer is not scientific. It's political. Because if humanity is a hybrid species, then the entire structure of authority, spiritual, political, historical, begins to collapse. If our creators were not gods but engineers, then who owns the narrative? Who benefits from the illusion? The truth is, we've seen signs of them, the sky people, for decades. The long-skulled remains in Paracas, the red-haired giants of Nevada, the tiny Homo floresiensis of Indonesia, civilizations and skeletons that don't fit our tidy evolutionary timeline. The official story says nothing of this. But the bones remember, the soil remembers, and the DNA, if we're ever allowed to read it, might speak louder than scripture. Now the question is no longer did they come, but did they leave? And perhaps more urgently, are we still following their program? Colonization has a pattern. It begins with arrival, dramatic, undeniable, overwhelming. Ships or crafts descend. A technologically superior force claims the land. installs rulers, installs laws, installs fear. Then comes the infrastructure, roads, systems, currency, schools. Education is rewired. Language is simplified. Time is measured. Memory is erased. A new order replaces the old, and those who remember are labeled madmen or myths. This is how empires operate, from Rome to Britain to America. But it's also how the Anunnaki moved. According to the cuneiform texts, they brought mathematics, astronomy, metallurgy, economics. They taught contracts, currencies, systems of weight and measure. They didn't just land, they installed a system. And then they disappeared. Not in a blaze, but in a handoff. They allowed humans to self-govern. Trained priests became politicians. Kings became intermediaries. The gods no longer needed to be present, only remembered. The economic system persisted. So did the calendars. So did the hierarchy. If you control time, you control attention. If you control measurement, you control value. If you control gold, you control labor. And if you control story, you control identity. Humanity inherited not only the tools of civilization but the psychology of obedience. We are, as some have suggested, hardwired to serve, to submit to higher powers, to seek approval from above, to equate hierarchy with safety. But what if the presence above is no longer there? What if the gods left, and we never stopped kneeling? Modern society still follows the logic of the colony. Rulers and ruled, owners and workers, clocks and contracts. The divine right of kings has become the corporate charter. The Anunnaki no longer walk among us, but their systems do. And if they withdrew, it wasn't out of mercy. It was efficiency. Let the locals enforce the rules. Let them police themselves. Let them believe the cage is home. And so they left the sky, but kept the throne. If you want to control a species, not for days, not for years, but for millennia, you don't need chains. You need programming. The cuneiform records suggest it wasn't just our bodies that were engineered. It was our perception, our cognition, our capacity to remember. Enlil, the overseer, feared what humans could become. Not because we were dangerous, but because we were capable. Too adaptable. Too aware. So the solution wasn't war, it was limitation. The tablets speak of the dumbing down of mankind. A neurological interference. A removal of speech or memory or consciousness itself. In the biblical version, it's the confusion of tongues at Babel. In the Sumerian, it's the scattering of minds, the collapse of connection between heaven and earth. We were fragmented, not just as tribes, but within ourselves. And still, something survived. The other side of the story, the rebel scientist Enki, embedded within us something else. A memory, a vibration, potential. Some say it's the pineal gland. Some say it's dormant DNA. Others say it's the soul itself, a code waiting to be unlocked. He taught us how to farm, how to write, how to question. He gave us music, language, the art of measurement and the magic of metaphor. He whispered through myths, through symbols, through teachers who came later bearing his imprint. Prometheus, Thoth, Hermes, Odin, each a guardian of the flame, and that flame lives in us. This is why certain truths feel like memories, why the sound of ancient language stirs something deep, why sacred geometry, vibration, ritual, they all feel known. It's not nostalgia, it's inheritance, but the system built by Enlil never vanished. Its structures still govern us. The cycles still grind us down. The enslavement wasn't physical, it was neurological. We measure our worth in hours, minutes, gold. We forget who we are, but never stop working. Because somewhere deep in the code, the slave protocols still run. But what if they could be broken? Enki did more than encode memory. He left maps, not written in ink, but in ritual, in rhythm, in breath. The cultures that preserved his name, even in broken form, also preserved keys. Hidden in plain sight, across the earth, fragments of forgotten technologies remain, not of metal or machine, but of consciousness. In ancient Greece, the Kykeon, a sacred brew, opened the doors of perception. In Mesoamerica, Chichen ceremonies used plant-infused teas to reach altered states. In India, breath became a vehicle for ascension. In Egypt, geometry became prayer. In Tibet, vibration became medicine. In Australia, smoke became language. These were not superstitions. They were upgrades, and they shared one secret. When the mind is quiet, the code can be rewritten. The pineal gland, the seat of the soul, responds to frequency, to rhythm, to light. Ancient initiates knew this. That's why their temples were not churches, but tuning chambers, designed to resonate with the body, the breath, the stars. When you sit in stillness, truly still, you can feel it. The quiet hum, the subtle intelligence. Not thought but memory, the part of you untouched by schooling or screen. The part of you that never forgot. Modern science, inching toward the metaphysical, now confirms what mystics always knew. Consciousness is not a product of the brain. It is a field, a frequency, a stream, and that stream is ancient. That's why synchronicities multiply when you begin to awaken. Why certain dreams feel more real than waking life. Why you remember things you've never been told. The residue of Enki's rebellion still lives in you. The Anunnaki may have built the system, but one of them left us a way out. Not in violence, not in revolt, in remembering, in retuning. You are not here to serve them anymore. You are here to remember that you never had to. So now we ask not what happened. We ask what now. If we are hybrid beings, part earth, part sky, then we are not accidents. We are interfaces, bridges, consciousness clothed in clay. And what was buried within us was not just obedience. It was potential. The Anunnaki withdrew, but the system remained. Time, money, war, worship, all calibrated to keep us in orbit around power, around lack, around gods that do not answer because they never promised to. We inherited a map of reality designed for limitation, a mind wired for submission. But that map is not the territory. There are cracks now, glitches, places where the program flickers, synchronicities, dreams, memory that defies biology. The more you pay attention, the more they multiply. Not because reality is shifting, but because you are. The field responds to frequency. The moment you change your signal, the matrix bends. This is why ancient initiates spoke of awakening, not salvation. You do not wait to be rescued. You remember you never needed to be. We are not abandoned. We are unfinished. And the question that echoes now, in silence, in symbols, in the breath between thoughts, is this: what if the gods left because we were ready? Ready to govern ourselves. Ready to end the slavery. Ready to rewrite the code. The story of the Anunnaki is not just history. It is a mirror, a warning, but also an invitation. Because if we were designed for labor, then let us choose creation. If we were taught to obey, then let us learn to listen inwardly. If we were broken, then let us become whole. This is not mythology. This is memory. And you are the descendant of a forgotten rebellion. What will you do with that truth? Power divides not because it must, but because it fears union. There were never gods, only governors. And not even they could agree. In the earliest layers of memory, carved into clay with reed and fire, we find a family at war. Not over land, not over conquest, over us. The Sumerians didn't write in metaphor. They documented in mechanism. And what they recorded was not a myth. It was a management conflict. Enlil, the supreme commander, sought order. Humanity was a means, a labor force bred for function. Minds narrowed, lives short, language controlled. It was efficient, cold, clean. Enki, the geneticist, saw differently. He had shaped our bodies, spliced the code. But in doing so, he felt something unexpected. Recognition. A flicker of shared sentience. He saw the possibility of consciousness, not obedience. And so he began to intervene. He taught writing, measurement, music. He taught us to name stars, to carve stone, to speak the unspoken. He did not just upgrade our biology, he activated memory. The Sumerians called him the Lord of the Earth, the Serpent of Wisdom, the bearer of the Forbidden Code. The Bible rebranded him Satan, because history, when redacted, reverses its heroes. But the fracture was real. The Anunnaki were not unified. The project was in dispute. and the battleground was us. Enlil wanted reset. When humanity grew restless, when it began to gather, to build, to speak with one voice, he triggered collapse. The Babel event. Not a tower, a node. Point of convergence. A stargate, some believe. A resonance beacon. It had to be destroyed. Language was shattered. Consciousness fragmented. The singular mind of man was broken into dialects, borders, rivalries. Not to punish, but to prevent. Enki resisted. Quietly, codedly. He preserved knowledge in symbols, in geometry, in bloodlines. He whispered through architecture. He sang through myth. He encrypted the memory of wholeness into ritual, and hid it in the breath. Those who listened remembered. But the program of forgetfulness had begun. The flood was the final act of erasure. A reset not just of life, but of lineage. Enlil's order was execution. Enki's rebellion was rescue. He warned Atrahasis. He gave the design not of a boat but a biopod, a genetic archive. Zayusadra, Utnapishtim, Noah. Same man, same story, same defiance. This was not about animals 2 by 2. It was about the continuity of the human experiment, the version Enki believed in, the version with awareness. So the earth was washed, but not wiped, and Enlil's grip weakened. The next generations remembered less. The stories blurred. The symbols faded. But something remained. Something beneath language. A hum in the blood. Enki had left an echo in the flesh. The pineal gland, perhaps. A crystalline node in the center of the brain, sensitive to frequency, responsive to rhythm, to light, to intention. Called the third eye by mystics, the seat of the soul by philosophers. It does not invent visions. It receives them. And what it receives, when tuned, is not new information, but old remembrance. This is why ritual matters. Not for worship, for realignment. The ancients knew. They fasted. They breathed. They chanted in tones that made the bones vibrate. They drank bitter brews that unlocked the gate of inner vision. They constructed chambers where sound met stone in harmonic convergence. Not for magic, for memory, because forgetting was the disease, and remembering was the cure. Enki's legacy lives in every act of awakening, in the sudden insight, in the dream that speaks in symbols, in the number that repeats, in the face that feels older than this life, in the question that won't let go. Why does this feel known? We are the children of 2 agendas. One seeks silence, the other song. And the war has not ended. It has only changed format. Today it is waged in education, in media, in pharmacology, in theology. It is waged through distraction, through saturation, through algorithm. But the battlefield remains the same, the human mind. And beneath all the noise, the question still hums. What if your thoughts are not entirely your own? And what if some part of you, ancient, eternal, undivided, remembers how to listen beyond them? This is the fracture, and it runs not through the sky, but through your soul. Truth does not disappear. It is only buried, and bones are patient. Some truths are silenced not with denial, but with dust. In the early 20th century, a British archaeologist named Leonard Woolley unearthed a body, a woman, wrapped in gold and lapis. Her name was Pwabi. Her tomb lay untouched for 4,000 years beneath the sands of Ur, the same Ur from which Abraham came. She was not just royalty. She was anomaly. Her skull was larger than average. Elongated, not deformed, designed. Her remains suggested something not quite human. A different structure, a different presence. And beside her, instruments, glyphs, and artifacts that hinted at knowledge long before its time. In our era, this would be testable. DNA exists. The tech is available. But no genetic profile was published. No follow-up released. Instead, silence. Just as there was in 2003 when U.S. forces, under pretense of war, entered Iraq, not just Baghdad but its ancient sites. Near Uruk, near the cradle. And there, according to reports too quiet to be mainstream, something was found. A tomb. Sealed. Preserved. Labeled by some as the resting place of Gilgamesh, the hero king of myth, the hybrid of gods and men. And once again, the response was not revelation. It was redirection. No official investigation. No global announcement. The tomb, like the man, slipped back into shadow. But why? If the remains of a semi-divine figure had been uncovered, a literal link between humanity and its alleged creators, wouldn't this change everything? It would. And that is the problem. Because if Enki and Enlil were not myths but administrators of an old colonization, and if their hybrids walked the earth, then the story of religion collapses. The story of science, too. Evolution would need revision. Creation would lose its monopoly. Authority would fracture. And those who built empires on certainty of theology, of biology, of chronology would lose their ground. So the evidence must be buried. Puabi's DNA remains untested. Gilgamesh's tomb remains unexamined. Other discoveries, the long skulls of Paracas, the red-haired giants of Nevada, the hobbit people of Flores, Indonesia, are catalogued, then forgotten. Their implications, too large to process, are boxed and shelved. But bones do not lie, and ruins do not respect dogma. The deeper we dig, the more fractures we find in the official timeline. In Baalbek, stones too large to move even now. In Göbekli Tepe, temples too old to explain and buried on purpose. In Egypt, water erosion on the Sphinx, predating dynastic civilization. Evidence mounts. But evidence is not the issue. Narrative is. And so the silence continues. Not because the truth is not there, but because it's too loud. If a single tomb proves the Anunnaki were real, then the entire map of human history must be redrawn. Not linearly, not evolutionarily, but colonially. We were not alone. We were not first. And perhaps we are not even yet free. But the bones still call. And the earth remembers. And someday someone will open the right chamber. And not be afraid to speak. Empires do not vanish. They evolve. From visible chains to invisible systems. If you want to understand the Anunnaki, study the Romans. Study the Spanish. The Dutch. The British. Study how they came not just with weapons but with systems. With time. With names. With gods. The Anunnaki came first. And they set the template. According to the ancient tablets, they did not merely land. They installed. They altered the earth not just geologically, but structurally. They measured time in ways never seen before. 60 seconds. 60 minutes. 360 degrees. A base 60 system that still governs our clocks and compasses. This was not culture. It was code. Their colonies began in gold-rich regions, particularly in what we now call southern Africa. Ancient mines have been found there, dating back tens of thousands of years, predating known civilization. Circular structures, patterns, caverns too deep for primitive tools. The workforce? Engineered. The tablets speak clearly. A local primate was modified. Not born, not evolved, crafted. Given enough intelligence to follow. Enough strength to build. But not enough awareness to rebel. That was the goal. And like every good colonizer, they built an interface. Kingship. The Anunnaki did not remain visible forever. At a point, rulership was transferred. Kings were installed. Human but aligned. Trained. Obedient. And in every culture, Egyptian, Sumerian, Incan, Chinese, the story repeats. The first kings were taught by gods. Chosen by sky beings. Given law, symbols, calendars. But the gods left. Or appeared to. Because they no longer needed to rule directly. The systems were in place. Currency. Priesthood. Law. War. What matters is not who rules, but that the structure remains. That the pyramid stands. That the masses obey. And so they withdrew. A strategy we recognize now. Colonizers arrive. Conquer. Install. Then slowly they hand off. They let the locals teach their own children. Police their own streets. Enforce the colonizers' values as if they were native. The Anunnaki did the same. Why keep a garrison when the minds are already programmed? Why use force when belief will suffice? They left symbols and systems, sacred texts, sacred debts. They seeded competition, kingdoms warring over borders drawn by others. They fragmented language. They fractured memory. and then they vanished behind myth. The gods became legends. The legends became metaphors. The metaphors became religion, and religion became control. Today we worship in their architecture. We speak their math. We live by their time. We sell our hours for numbers invented by priest kings. We pray upward, always upward, as if heaven was still their domain. But what if they never left? What if their withdrawal was only optical? What if their systems still govern, still extract, still harvest, not gold now but attention, labor, data? The modern empire is digital, but its logic is ancient. The few direct the many, through screen, through fear, through scarcity, through story. And the story is always the same. You are small. You are late. You are lost without guidance from above. But this is not truth. It is programming. And the code was written long before your birth. The question now is not whether the Anunnaki existed. The question is whether their empire ever truly ended. And whether you are still a citizen of a colony that forgot it was one. They gave us limits. One of them gave us memory. There is a reason the serpent is the villain. In Eden, in myth, in medicine, the serpent appears where knowledge is hidden and offers it. Not as deception but as invitation. In the oldest tablets, Enki is the serpent, the engineer, the one who intervened, not out of pity, but out of principle. He saw that consciousness, once sparked, could not be contained. And so he gave us more than function. He gave us choice. This was the first rebellion, not of humans against gods, but of one God against the others on our behalf. The Bible calls it sin, the fall. But in the Sumerian version it was awakening. Enki did not tempt. He activated. He opened the neural field. He gave us the capacity to know, to imagine, to remember. And that memory is not abstract. It is cellular. Pulses through dreams, through symbols, through the inexplicable familiarity of places you've never been, through the ache for something you cannot name. That ache is the trace of the upgrade. And it did not end with language. Enki embedded within us tools, dormant at first but always present. The pineal gland, the mirror neurons, the intuitive synapse. He structured us not just to survive but to evolve. He knew that even if Enlil systems trapped our bodies, our minds could slip through. Over generations, this became ritual. In the temples of Greece, initiates drank kykeon, not for intoxication, but for alignment. In the Americas, Chichen brews activated ancestral memory. In the Vedic schools, breath was the bridge. In Egypt, vibration was sacred. The temples were not for worship. They were instruments. And everywhere, geometry, the silent language of memory. Circles, triangles, the golden mean. These were not decorations. They were instructions. But most forgot. Empires erased. Religions replaced. The serpent became Satan. The breath became blasphemy. The body became shame. Still, the memory survived. In the quiet, in the caves, in the bones. And now, again, it rises. Why do synchronicities multiply the moment you awaken? Why does time stretch during meditation? Why do certain sounds bring tears? Because the program is weakening, and the upgrade is reactivating. Science has begun to catch glimpses, calling it neuroplasticity, epigenetics, quantum entanglement. Language to describe what sages always knew. Reality responds to awareness. And the more you remember, the more it opens. This is why the world floods you with noise. Not to inform, but to keep you from listening. The upgrade is not coming. It came. And you carry it. The only question is whether you will use it to rebuild the cage or to dissolve its walls. Because rebellion was never destruction. It was remembrance. And Enki's final gift was not knowledge. It was the capacity to seek it. And to know when you found it by the resonance in your bones. Reports come daily now, not just sightings but patterns. Lights moving against wind and reason. Beings not quite humanoid, not quite machine. Memories that don't belong to this life. Voices without mouths. Warnings in dreams. But this is not new. It is the oldest thread. The Anunnaki never claimed to be gods. We gave them that title. Out of fear. Out of awe. Out of need. But they were never alone. and they were never final. From the Zulu to the Hopi, from Dogon star maps to Vedic Vimanas, the memory persists. Contact is not the exception. It is the origin, and it continues. Today we call them Greys, tall whites, reptilians, Nordics. We assign shapes to forces that defy form, but what we call them matters less than what they call forth in us, because something in us recognizes them. Some describe abduction, others speak of guidance. Some wake with marks, implants, stories that collapse under logic but hold under vibration. Still others never see but feel. Presence in the room, a pressure on the chest, a knowing. This is the echo. The ancient ones have not vanished. Their expression has shifted, their strategy adapted, and their agendas remain divided. Just as in Sumer there are those who guide and those who extract, those who teach and those who mute. One group offered gold and calendars. The other offered breath. The modern narratives are not fiction. They are filtered memory. Experiencers report missing time, altered consciousness, information downloads. These match ancient accounts of ascent, initiation, divine encounter. It is not that the phenomena are new. It is that our framework was collapsed. We were taught to fear what we do not control, to mock what does not fit the program. And so contact is reduced to entertainment, fiction, ridicule. But ask the pilot who saw a craft outmaneuver physics. Ask the child who describes a planet she's never read about. Ask the man who returned from near death with languages he never studied. Contact continues, because the veil was never solid, only suggested. Our minds were trained to look downward, to work, to consume, to repeat. But in moments, dreams, crisis, love, the pattern breaks, and something peers through, sometimes with eyes, sometimes with silence. And when it does, you remember that this isn't your first life, that Earth isn't your only home, that time is not a line. These aren't beliefs, they are recognitions. And now they're multiplying, because the systems are cracking. The lies cannot hold under the pressure of returning memory. You see it in architecture, in symbol, in sacred geometry blooming in the minds of those who've never studied it. You see it in children drawing star maps, in the dreams that speak before you wake. Contact is not about them. It is about us. It is the mirror. And in that mirror we face the truth. We are the experiment. We are the seed. We are the bridge between star and soil. And the bridge is opening. The fall of Atlantis wasn't destruction. It was consequence. The echo of wisdom unheeded. Before Babylon, before Egypt, before the first brick in Sumer, there was memory. Atlantis, not a myth, a frequency, a blueprint, a fracture. Plato called it an island of power, swallowed by the sea. But the sea was not water. It was forgetting, deliberate, engineered. Atlantis, as described across myth and sacred record, was a civilization where spirit and matter once walked together, where geometry healed, where sound built cities, where the mind was not imprisoned in the brain, but tuned, refined, expanded. The Atlanteans remembered. Until they didn't. Their downfall wasn't a flood. That was the final symptom. The true collapse came earlier, when the wisdom they carried was twisted. When energy began to obey will instead of harmony. When technology served the ego rather than the soul. Crystals, once tools for healing, became weapons. Sound, once tuned for consciousness, became control. Hierarchy emerged. The split returned. And the gods, or those remembered as such, left or watched. Edgar Cayce spoke of two factions. The sons of the law of one, and the sons of Belial. One guarded unity. The other pursued dominion. This was not mythic war. It was energetic dissonance. A civilization split between remembrance and power. Sound familiar? We build machines to extend our minds, yet lose ourselves in screens. We communicate across the globe, but forget how to feel each other. We manipulate DNA, yet cannot heal our fear. Atlantis is not a past event. It is a mirror, and we are staring into it now. If the Anunnaki seeded us with intelligence, Atlantis showed us what we could become, and also what we could lose. Many who awaken today speak not just of memories but of grief, a homesickness for a place not on any map, a sense that something was once whole, that we once knew how to live. This is not nostalgia. It is retrieval, because the knowledge was never lost. It was hidden, in the bones, in the blood, in the breath. Survivors of Atlantis, if the stories are true, did not vanish. They scattered. They became the architects of Egypt, the sages of India, the builders of the Andes. They encoded their knowing in temples, in stone, in stories, not for all, but for those who remember. You do not need to prove Atlantis. You only need to feel what is missing, the ache for balance, the memory of resonance, the longing for union between science and soul, and the warning, because we are at the edge again. We control power we do not revere. We seek conquest where we should seek coherence. We fracture in pursuit of progress. The Atlantean paradox is this: they rose through remembering, and fell through forgetting. The same choice is now ours. Do we repeat, or do we restore? Because Atlantis was never just about architecture or location or the sea. It was about consciousness. And consciousness does not drown. It waits. And now it knocks again, in the dreams, the symbols, the sudden knowing. Not to punish, not to shame, but to ask, will you choose differently this time? They told you history was written in books. They lied. It was written in your bones. You were never meant to remember. That was the first layer of control, not fences, not weapons, but forgetting. The programming began early. You were taught what to see, how to name, who to trust. You were told who you are, and more dangerously, who you are not. But the code is breaking, because memory cannot die. It only sleeps, and now it wakes. You feel it in the quiet, in the misfit ache, in the knowing that this life is not the first time you've asked the question, why am I here? The Anunnaki may have engineered the body. The Atlanteans may have built the bridge, but neither own the soul. That is yours. And now the choice is too. You were born into a system of time, money, authority, belief, a structure inherited from sky kings and stone empires, taught you to obey, to compare, to forget. But inside the noise, there is another voice, fainter, older, unbroken. It speaks not in commands, but in resonance. The truth now is not external. It is vibrational. Your biology is a frequency device. Your thoughts, tuning forks. Your emotions, compasses. You shape your world through alignment, not through effort, through coherence. And coherence begins with sovereignty. Not rebellion, not violence, but a quiet refusal to remain asleep. This is the exit. Not through escape, but through presence. You are not here to wait for rescue. You are not here to serve an invisible elite. You are not here to repeat the fall of Atlantis, or the silence of Babel, or the obedience of Eden. You are here to remember, and in remembering, to choose. This is the war now, not over territory, but over perception. Your energy is harvested not through machines, but through belief, through fear, through fragmentation. But you are not a fragment. You are a fractal, a whole hologram of the cosmos, folded into skin. And when you align breath, thought, action, you become undivided again. You begin to hear the frequency, the one that was muted, the one that says, you are not late. You are not lost. You are not small. You are a living archive of everything your ancestors saw, endured, built, survived. And your future is not written. It is remembered. The Akashic field, the divine records, they are not myth. They are interface. And the password is presence. Not learning but tuning. Not asking but listening. And when you do, the veil thins. The noise fades. And all the systems that once enslaved you become visible. And therefore reversible. You do not need permission. You do not need a prophet. You do not need another code to follow. You are the code. And you are rewriting it now with every choice to breathe instead of react. To wonder instead of fear. To align instead of obey. The story you were told ends in hierarchy. But the true story ends in harmony. And it begins again now with you.